Good afternoon. I'm so grateful to be your moderator today. My name is Asheanna Suresh. I am a senior at Richmond Hill High School, and I'm also an apprentice for the Office of Student Pathways within NYC Public Schools. Today, our panel is called Bridging the Gap, so let's get into it. I'm very proud that how my school has CRMYA, Future Ready, CRSYP. It's a lot. Thank you. We have a lot of programs, and I'm very grateful for it. But on the back end of that, what about the other students that don't necessarily know English or are struggling, don't necessarily, and are also the ones that recently arrived? What about them? How do we help them to understand what these different youth programs are about and how they all coincide with each other? Today, we have an amazing panel lineup. Say hi, everybody. Hi, everyone. Today, each of these organizations are here to help move towards a cohesive system meant to best support youth development. So, please make sure you remember there will be a Slido. You can put in your questions. So, we'll be going down the list of our panelists. Please say your name, your organization, and when you were in high school, what did you want to be when you grow up?
This end first? Yep. Okay. Good afternoon. Marty Forth. I am the University Assistant Dean at CUNY in the K-16 office. K-16 is the bridge between the Department of Education and City University of New York and other universities, of course. And what did I want to be when I grew up? In high school and elementary school, I wanted to be a psychologist. I am a doctorate of social work, so I got pretty close. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eliza Loehr, Senior Director of Strategy at New York City Public Schools, Office of Student Pathways. When I was in high school, I actually wanted to be a deep space astronomer, and so I did not get there. But I thought you had to live in the middle of nowhere to be able to see the stars, because I didn't have a good career guidance counselor to help me understand that that's not actually true.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nurus Salam. I'm Senior Director of Workforce Connect at the UICD Department of Youth and Community Development. We run a number of workforce programming, including Summer Youth Employment Program, which is the largest youth employment program in the country, if not in the world. And I wanted to be a teacher because both of my parents were a teacher back in Bangladesh, but I ended up in civil servant, and I absolutely love my job.
Hi, my name is Erika Delacruz. I'm the Academic Director of Collaborative Programs at Kingsborough Community College. I also love my job. We work with several programs that collaborate between high school and college, including College Now, Future Ready, DYCD Work, Learn, Grow, New Paths, and many others, and Liberty Partnerships. I can go on, and ECI. We really are the connection between high school students and the transition that they have to make. When I was in high school, I wanted to be a lawyer. I did get all the way through, got into law school, but life took me in a different direction, and here I am in education, but I do love my job.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Erika Hurtado-Valentino, and I am the founding principal of the Northwell School of Health Sciences, former principal of Food and Finance High School, and former principal of Bronx Aerospace High School, all CTE schools. It's my 11th year as principal. Super proud to say that, all for New York City Public Schools. And when I was growing up, I wanted to be one of two things, either a surgeon or a principal. I know it's kind of crazy, but I always said, if I'm gonna be a teacher, I'm gonna be a principal one day. And I guess you kind of see where life took me and the choice I made, so here I am.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kimberly Paramhance. I am the Director of Community-Based Programs at the Boys and Girls Club of Metro Queens. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a teacher. I'm actually a proud CUNY Queens College alumni. So I was in school to be an elementary school teacher, and then I started at the Boys and Girls Club 7 years ago, and I absolutely fell in love with the nonprofit world, decided teaching probably wasn't for me anymore, and I just committed my career to the youth and working on the ground with them.
Thank you so much. Since they answered the question, I also will. I'm currently in high school, and I think I'm going towards forensic psychology. We'll see where it goes. We'll be back. So our first question will start from Kimberly, coming back this way. In 10 years, what's your vision for how NYC prepares its young people for long-term careers?
Great. So I think that New York City has been doing a great job when it comes to workforce development, but we still have a very long way to go. It really does start with the schools. It starts with what's happening in the schools. So right now, I think we're very, very focused on the teens and the later half of middle school. But I would love to see that career exploration kind of start in elementary school. I'm a firm believer that it's never too early to start talking about what your career interests are. Of course, making it a safe space for them to change their minds. I remember when I was younger, I definitely did not end up doing what I thought I was going to be doing. I think I wanted to be a princess of some sort. But that age, you really are identifying what it is that you like. You're learning about yourselves, and you're really, really just investing in that, and you want the support. As far as the collaboration part of it, I think the city, the schools, the nonprofits, we just keep that communication open. We really, really want to have the feedback culture of what's working and what's not working, and know that it is a very flexible time. The generation of students is always going to be changing, so we want to make sure that we are changing as well. And yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Hi, everyone. My vision is to be able to see everyone here on this panel, all these different entities from New York City, develop a shared language around what it means to be career ready. So when we think about soft skills or industry-specific skills, mapping that all the way back to, for example, even elementary school. It's not just about learning about careers and seeing what you're interested in. So even when we think about opportunities for internships, we're talking about ages and grades. What exactly does that mean? But if we have a dialogue and a conversation understanding around assessments and what are those soft skills that we're looking for in students, educators like myself will be in a better position to work with their teams to develop those skills, to embed them in the instructional framework, to be able to really properly support students so that all students, whether English language learners, students with IEPs, also have access and the opportunity to work on strengthening those skills so that when there is an internship available or a career opportunity, they have greater clarity and they have a good chance at getting that.
To further that, access and opportunity, that's something we work on in the Office of Collaborative Programs all of the time. It's interesting to talk about being future, 10 years. We're doing that work already, really assessing where New York City will be in 10 years, what employment opportunities would our students have, and designing our programs specifically to help students navigate those type of careers. I'm very excited to be working with the Future Ready program, which talks to all of that and preparing our students.
Workforce landscape has changed after the COVID, and Kathy earlier mentioned what employers are looking for, right? Employers are always looking for folks who are already ready to enter workforce. On DYCD side, we have done an incredible job with the help of our providers, scaling up SYP to over 100,000 young people. But we have also thought about what more can we do, right, in terms of improving the quality. So one of the things we did past 3 years, we introduced standardized work readiness training for all young people. So any young peoples, regardless of where they're coming from, they're receiving similar level of work readiness training, whether learning how to write resume, how to write cover letter. Also, we're focusing on financial literacy. That was not standardized before, and we just didn't stick to the work readiness training. We also thought about hard skills, because earlier Kathy mentioned how employers from information technology looking for folks with hard skills, and these are the jobs that actually pays really well. On the SYP side, we introduce PTD, professional and technical development. Through PTD, our young people's learning information technology, coding skills, the skills that they need when it comes to entering business and professional services. We also have graphic design. That's another thing we are teaching our young peoples. But that's not enough, right? Teaching young peoples all those skills, we also need employers to commit, because exposure is very important. And I think about my journey in workforce. I never thought about public service, but my internship with back in the days, it was called Mayor's Office of Housing Recovery Operations. It literally changed my life. It showed me that different careers that exist within city government, and that's how I landed my job with DYCD. I've been there for over 10 years. And I want to make sure that our young people also have that access, right? If they're interested interning with a financial firm, we want to make sure that those organizations are making a commitment to our program. And it will also take the burden from our nonprofit partners, who have to rely a lot on daycare, day camp, and retail jobs when it comes to summer youth employment program. And we want to make sure in next 10 years, we move away from that, and we are focusing on employers from thriving industry sectors that are taking on our participants and preparing them to enter workforce.
Let's do it. For this question, it made me think about a student, Faith Davenport, that was talking about her experience with Google. I'm like, Maria, that was there. And she was talking about how her experience of being on site at Google raised her expectations of her future employer. That has stuck with me, because it really makes me think about what young people in New York City can expect from each of us, from all of us on this stage. And so my vision is that in 10 years, every single young person in New York City, and by every single young person I mean that we're thinking about recent arrivals, that we're thinking about students with IEPs, know that they can expect that we on this stage will prepare them for their futures, will prepare them for the high wage, high growth careers, that they'll be able to explore those, they'll have guidance throughout it, they'll be able to build the skills and networks, and that they don't have to memorize 10 different acronyms to know what that means.
Great answers. I would say that I would hope in 10 years that we had a much more seamless system, especially for the young person. Students, young people get lost in gaps between all of our very large, very intricate systems, and they shouldn't have to. All of our systems should be able to talk to each other. The students should move from a volunteer experience, education, to a paid experience, and on to college eventually without too much difficulty. The fact that they get frustrated because they don't know their OSIS number when they're applying to college now and CUNY is a deterrent to some kids, but it doesn't have to be that. If we had data systems that spoke to each other seamlessly in the back end, young people would just see the natural progression as things went along, and they'd jump at those experiences, I think.
Thank you so much. For our next question, we will start with Erika from CUNY. Okay, and then let's start. What collaborative approaches have been proven successful on the ground when it comes to supporting historical underserved NYC youth in building their careers?
The collaborative approaches that have been successful in my experience are the programs that provide opportunities for students to take the courses, as well as provide some sort of financial benefit, whether it's financial, whether it's a stipend, a scholarship. Underserved communities are in need, as we all know, and here in New York City specifically. And that has been something that really has elevated several of our programs, that financial commitment to our students. In addition, students who are ELL, providing an instructor that can comfortably speak to them has also been very successful for us. We work with over 155 instructors, and we have instructors who speak multiple languages. I don't think you can challenge me with one language that I'm not going to be able to provide you an instructor that speaks it. So it's worked for us. It's worked for us, and it makes the student more comfortable when communicating with their faculty. Thank you.
Kim?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with Erika. And just to speak about it a little bit more in what we've seen in the past few years. So at the Boys and Girls Club of Metro Queens, we have an SYEP contract with DYCD, as well as a Work, Learn, and Grow contract. And we're very career ready focused. So we see the same kids go through the program over and over again. We have some students that were 14 and they did the program until they were 21, 22 years old. So there's something that's being done right, and it's just giving them that opportunity to really explore the different pathways, being able to change their mind if they really needed to, creating, again, that safe space for them to say, okay, every job I tell my kids, it's either you're gonna love it or you're not gonna like it, but there's gonna be something you take from it. So it might be that you realize you really love doing this one thing, or you absolutely don't like it. Okay, let's use that for the next experience moving forward. But clearly something's working. We see it in the numbers rising every year. We get more and more applicants. So it would be great to be able to serve all the kids. So just continuing what we're doing.
Last but not least, Erika from Northwell.
Thank you. In my experience, what has worked really well is when the school leader has an opportunity to work with employers or a CBO around not just what opportunities are out there, but I know earlier I spoke about having a shared language. So for example, at Food and Finance, we work with the Food Education Fund, which actually Eliza was the executive director of many moons ago. And so we didn't just have conversations around, oh, we have these restaurants that need cooks or need waiters. That never drove the conversation. It was around, for example, who are the students who excel in the back of the house, who excels in the front of the house? Now let's take it further. What skills are we actually talking about? Knife skills, line cooks. We're talking about, presentations, being able to communicate, showing empathetic, like knowing how to set the table. So like being very specific on what were those skill sets that we needed our students to excel in to be able to qualify for these positions. And then because I was the principal, I was then able to include my cabinet, my teachers, and align them to the New York State CTE standards. And then it will make its way back to our instructional framework. And so that allowed us to kind of close the gaps instructionally so that the skill sets were not always just taught in the kitchens, right? Or in the hospitality rooms. They were being taught in math, in science, in English, in social studies, etc. It gave our students to also show their thinking, express their knowledge, and be able to collaborate with one another by executing a lot of those strengths that they only know how to execute in the kitchen. So they were able to identify themselves what those transferable skills were, right? And so what we found was that by doing that, we were actually able to increase our pool of students that qualified and were able to take advantage and wanted these opportunities. And so our internship program expanded from having 25 students to having 70 seniors taking advantage of these opportunities, right? And then as you're doing this work and you're really empowering student voice and finding out what are they interested in, what are they passionate about, they're in a better place to be able to articulate what it is that they're passionate about, what their dreams are, because now they're tying it back to what they're good at. Because that is human nature. We always want to do and continue doing what we do well. Nobody wakes up and says, I want to go do X, and that's like the one thing you're horrible at, right? It's like everyone dreads that. And so really about developing a curriculum, a mindset, a philosophy around strengths-based learning is really the way to strengthen students and increasing your pool and accessibility for all. And so that is something, a big practice that we're taking into the Northwell school design, for example, as we're working with Northwell Health, and we're about to onboard our post-secondary partners and our curriculum development team. It's thinking about the curriculum for each pathway, the intentionality behind it, and then also what are the standards, aligning that to career industry, and also post-secondary from the 9th grade. And then when we identify those standards and those skills, that is going to drive now our decision-making in terms of what does work-based learning and career-connected instruction looks like by grade level.
Thank you so much. Our next question is for Central. How can partnerships across your organization support in scaling these innovations? We'll start with Marty. How can partnerships across your organization support in scaling these innovations?
I mean, we partner very well together already, all of us do. We're in regular conversation all the time. I think as each of us starts something new, having the voice of those partners right from the start is key, right? So that we are designing with each other's strengths in mind, and what we're truly able to do. Making promises for other agencies is never a good idea, but having them at the table from the start is always the best bet. So I think that would be kind of the primary thing for us to do.
We can pass it down the line.
Sure. I think when I think about this, each of us, as Nurus mentioned, have done a really good job of scaling and strengthening our programs. We do talk a lot. There's 100,000 students, over 200,000 students, about 100,000 in our programming and 1 million in New York City public schools overall. But there's a ton of overlap, as you've been hearing, of I think about 80% of CUNY students come from New York City public schools. Is that right? Probably about 80% of SYP students are New York City public schools. And a lot of our initiatives, as you heard from Asheanna, exist within the same schools. So I think what we can do a better job of is thinking about, from a student lens, from a school lens, what the experience looks like, and kind of building on what we heard from Erika and Kimberly of like, what are the skill sets? How do those scaffold, maybe breaking away from grades, of kind of like what are the different phases that we want to build on, and how do those map to employers? Because I think none of what they mention is specific to any of the things that we do. And I think we're just not really, honestly, incentivized or kind of trained to think in that way, but each of us are trying hard to think about what that could look like for students on a bigger scale. But maybe just quickly to go kind of back to the question of, I think partnership is not like a piece of a puzzle. I think that's the entire puzzle, and each of us are puzzle pieces. And if we can do that well, I think then we're what I say, like shouldering the burden of complexity, of not putting that on students and schools and all of you to have to figure out the different pieces and how they fit together in the OSIS numbers. But we figure out on the back end of what that looks like for funding and systems and timelines, so that it's a more seamless process that really can support all students.
I think when we are talking about DYCD, New York City Public Schools, and the CUNY working together, it's important to talk about Career Ready NYC framework, which was released back in 2018, and it talked about how each agency should be working together. And Marty, you mentioned earlier the data sharing piece too. And result of that framework was Career Ready SYP, right? It made us intentional in terms of the young people we serve. In SYP, we used to select young people based on a lottery. Now there's significant amount of young people are selected based on the conversations that takes place between provider like Kimberly and the school partners, school principals. They decide in terms of which young people are going to be part of SYP, what their summer experience is going to look like. When we started back in 2019, we had only 4,000 young people. This past summer, we served over 23,000 young people, and we expanded to over 230 schools just on the Career Ready SYP side. That's our partnership with New York City Public Schools. On the CUNY side, based on the success of Career Ready SYP, we introduce academic component into our workforce programming. And that's why we partner with Kingsborough Community College. The first year, we had 2,000 young people taking different CUNY courses, and this fall we have almost 7,000 young people that are taking credit-bearing CUNY courses. And one of the things I think, Erika, you mentioned earlier, right? Meeting young people's needs, right? That's why we're super intentional. Even this year is the first year we have young people's, we have CUNY courses that are in person. There are young people that are in detention that are taking CUNY courses, and we have instructors going into those facilities to provide that course. We also have young people with disability in our program, and Erika and her team has been super impressive when it comes to identifying instructor that works with young people with disability, and we have been offering courses to them. This is the very first year they're taking credit-bearing courses. So it shows overall, like, this was in theory before, and now a lot of those are in practice, right? We are working together. Even this past summer, through SYP, we served over 100,000 young people. There is going to be significant amount of New York City students that are going to receive academic credit based on their SYP hours. And it was possible because we have a robust data sharing with New York City public schools now. It wasn't the case before. So overall, there's been so many positive, but there's so much work that we need to do for future to make sure that we are capturing all the young people that come to our system.
This is anybody's question. How can tools and digital resources be leveraged to expand access to career pathways for NYC youth? Who would like to go?
I'll go. Technology is amazing. The things that we have access to now, we didn't have it 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So I can only imagine where it's going. I think because of the COVID pandemic, a lot of things were kind of forced to go virtual, which kind of helped us grow in a way, because now the students have access to all these amazing resources just on their cell phones. Something that we do at the Boys and Girls Club is we're able to take the kids on college tours. You're actually able to do virtual college tours now and virtual career fairs. So there's so many possibilities out there. We can even talk about building the technical skills and the certification programs that are out there that the kids can do. And we have the amazing funding to be able to pay them while they do these things and really invest and build their resume. So by the time they graduate high school, they have all these amazing skills that are all thanks to technology.
I can maybe jump in. So I think this is another place where each of us are doing some great things, and there's probably possibility to do them better together. I think from a New York City public schools side, we just launched a couple of digital advising tools, kind of over guidance that all schools and students have access to, that can be kind of force multipliers for the advisors, since a lot of advisors in schools have 250 students that they're working with, and not enough time in the day to support all of them the way that they want to. But I will say uptake is a real challenge when you're talking about kind of 1 million students in an entire school system. So I think that's where we can kind of use all of your support in learning about the resources that exist that are out there, and making sure that they're in the hands of the students that can really benefit from them. And then maybe just one quick thing to add to kind of what Kimberly was mentioning of virtual internships. I think it's kind of a scary word for a lot of us. I think we, especially in the pandemic, we kind of think of it has a reputation of not being high quality, of students just sit at home and don't do anything. But if you think about all of us, probably all of us work at least partially remote. And so I think we need to really embrace that, understand what quality looks like, build on the successful models of how we do that, and then that really is kind of a force multiplier, especially for a student that lives in Far Rockaway that might have young siblings to take care of maybe going to Manhattan for an internship after school every day is not possible, but that doesn't mean that they should be kind of locked out of an experience.
Okay.
If I can add.
Go for it.
On the DYCD side, so earlier I talked about standardizing work readiness training, and for that we are actually utilizing a digital platform which is called Hats and Ladders. They're a work readiness training platform that have been working with us for past 5 years, and we have been making so many improvements. Even for upcoming year, we're thinking about how we can utilize a lesson plan on AI. How can our young people utilize AI when it comes to improving their resume, cover letter writing, because these are great tools, but we have to direct our young people how to utilize in their best interest.
I have one thing to add. I always say that our job in collaborative programs is to make sure that students transition well from high school to college. CUNY Central introduced the universal online application. And these online applications, for those of you who have had students or children who've applied to CUNY can be a bit complicated, even though I think it's complicated for us and not them, because my kids could do this like with their eyes closed. But I think it's a very important tool because once they apply online to college now, it already gets them going for the next step, which is the CUNY application, and the next step, which is their graduate school application. So our job is to help them go through those steps early on so they're not intimidated when they have to go into their private colleges or CUNY.
Another tool that I would mention that we do with DOE, or New York City Public Schools, is the bridge advising. So high school seniors, as they're graduating, the 60,000 almost of them, as they're graduating, will receive a text from CUNY saying, are you ready for the next step after you graduate? Are you going to work? Are you going to college? What haven't you done? What have you done? How can we get you there? And that individual has access through this technology to be advised on how to do the rest of their application, find housing, apply for whatever they need, God forbid have to complete the FAFSA. And so that kind of technology seems so simple, yet has proven to be very successful in helping young people finish the tiny little steps they need to get to that next step.
Okay. There are some questions on the board. How can educators be better trained and educated about career pathways so that young people can have a higher quality career pathway experience? Who would like to take the question? Go for it.
So going back to shared language, because even in the last question, we all spoke about all the different ways technology can help, right? And they're all helping a specific entity, a specific goal. But as a challenge for a lot of schools is that most often these platforms don't speak to each other. So now I'm stuck trying to navigate and access 10 different platforms or helping a student navigate this piece, right? And now we're talking about AI, which just now complicates things. Now we're talking about virtual learning. So when I think about how we can better, just going back to the question, prepare educators, I mean, technology for one is a resource, right? And so like we know that there are a lot of organizations out there right now that are focusing on this. They're developing platforms, they're developing workshops, modules to really help adults, engage in a lot of like self-learning, like independent work. But I think what New York City, the Future Ready is doing really well right now is engaging in that training with our guidance counselors, our social workers, our work-based learning coordinators, and tying it back to like what are our outcomes and what do we want to see from students. And I think it's doing a really nice job at connecting that to a lot of the internship opportunities that are totally aligned to a specific pathway, which then connects to the post-secondary piece as well. So I do think that we're on the right path right now, and I think that we're seeing those shifts, right? Especially with New York State, as now like it's going to be an expectation that all high schools engage in some kind of career-connected learning. And so I think that it really goes back to the school community in identifying what is our goal and our mission. Are we specifically focusing on specific pathways or just like an overall broad picture? And if so, going back to the shared language and CTE standards, is going back to what are those key strands that we need to identify and focus on, and how do they connect to jobs and careers that are high need right now?
I think another part of that is educators being open to the idea that this isn't just about education, but also bridging to the real world. And I will be the first to admit as a higher education employee that we don't do that very well all the time. We provide degrees, we do great classes, and some of our industries, some of our degree pathways do it really well. Our tech, our healthcare do it really well, but other degree pathways don't. We teach theory, but we don't always adjust our syllabi to make sure that they connect to real world experiences, that young people see themselves in that position and that job. And we could do better at that.
I think maybe just to quickly build on that, I think for us, it's essential of showing like the ROI for educators. Of sometimes I think it can feel like, what? Like you want me to prepare students for their entire lives and I'm supposed to know about every single career? And understanding that when you're preparing students for the long term, that actually raises attendance, that raises students' engagement. It actually kind of to some extent makes your job easier as a teacher because students understand that, like, Miss, why am I learning this? Which I got that question all the time. And then again, going back to platforms of, like, you don't need to know everything about a changing labor market if you have access to a platform that you can be like, look it up. You know, why don't you see what the labor market says about this? Why don't you can guide them through that process. But I remember feeling like I needed to know everything about every career, which can feel overwhelming. So I think it can be framing it and showing the value, and then bringing, I see the next question on here, but bringing employers, bringing all of you in to do that, because we as the education system often don't have the answers, don't have the knowledge, and that's where we need all of you to come in and speak to educators.
Just add a resource. Karan from WPTI. So those of you that are have DYCD contracts, we're a capacity building provider for career development. We actually have a training next week on coaching for career pathways, and the following week on applied labor market intelligence. And then we're doing some trainings for New York City Public Schools on internship development 101, a couple sessions in 2025. So feel free to connect with me on those offerings.
What is one thing CBOs and other nonprofits can do to support schools in giving students the resources they need to have a good career pathway experience?
I'll go. In my experience, having been a principal in a school where we didn't have a partnership and having to, struggle to find a partnership, which is, something that has continued at that particular school, and then being at Food and Finance where there was this long-standing partnership, I can share with you that the biggest compliment that you can bring to the school community is having a focus. So sometimes CBOs want to do it all, a little bit of everything, and that's awesome. And God bless if you have those resources and that capacity. But oftentimes, specifically the way in which schools are designed right now through Future Ready and CTE, right, they're compartmentalized. So I guess my feedback would be if CBOs would just choose and say, we are going to focus on technology, we're going to focus on business entrepreneurship, culinary, whatever it is, right? Like find that golden ticket and say, hey, schools, who needs this? And then I think that will be just like the greatest use of resource right there in terms of CBOs.
I just wanted to add something as well. I agree with you, Erika. I think that in order to get that information, or what would really benefit the school and the population of students at that school, is to sit with the school leadership team and have the open conversation of what is the population of students here interested in? What is the need of the community that the school is located in? And what can I do as the CBO to offer something or bring something to your school in-house where the students don't even have to leave the building to get them to feel more comfortable and confident in their career pathway? And bringing those things in, whether it's a workshop, whether it's having staff in the building 5 days during the week, it really just depends on building that relationship with the school.
Our next question is, how are ways that your organizations are supporting justice-impacted youth? What are the key partners already doing that work?
I can talk about us. So a couple years ago, we had a program called Freedom Prep, where we went into institutions where justice-involved youth were. The program left for a period. We're bringing it back now. So we're bringing College Now or CUNY classes to institutionalized individuals, young people, whether they've finished high school or not, so that they're the in-between. But it's not just a matter of bringing the course to them. We have to bring educators that have special skills and knowledge and patience to work with such populations and to work in a facility that has such unique challenges sometimes. And so making sure that those educators, those adjuncts that are teaching those courses get the population and get the situation where it is. Additionally, we obviously, lots of different CUNY campuses do research around this subject and work with adults that are leaving these same systems. So it's not something new to us, but we need to be doing more of it.
For DYCD, as I mentioned earlier, right, in terms of our work with SYP, we're being very intentional in terms of who we start, right? In addition to the lottery and the Career Ready SYP, where we work with the schools in terms of determining who gets into the program, we also have slots reserved for young peoples that are justice involved, because there's a population that we want to make sure that their resources allocated. Even as I mentioned earlier, through Kingsborough Community College, we have young peoples that are in detention center that are taking the CUNY courses. And we work with Department of Probation, ACS, all these different city agencies when it comes to getting those referrals and making sure that these young peoples also have the services that they need in order for them to enter workforce.
How are your organizations involving young people in the strategy, development, advocacy, and implementing of your agency's workforce efforts?
I applaud you for reading sideways. It's very hard to do. I can maybe take that one and just say that I'm looking at it, or at least one piece of it, and I'm very honored to work alongside Asheanna and 3 other student apprentices that have honestly transformed the way that we move as an office. I was thinking in my head about one thing that Asheanna said to me about all the different programs of just like, make it make sense. Like, think about that all the time, but just having all of your voices in terms of like, you all think that that's what students want? Having you all there with us every single day has been hugely impactful, and also having you all kind of tell the story and be a really big part of our social media. You should follow us on LinkedIn, they run it, and on our Instagram. Is kind of one piece of the puzzle, but then also making sure that every evaluation that we do, that we're making sure we have student focus groups at the beginning of a program as we set them up as a part of the process of kind of our development in our coalitions. And then later too, in terms of understanding, is it working? Is it not? Some of the qualitative pieces to add texture to that data. But I will say, if you are not hiring a student apprentice, you should. Working with young people every single day has made our work so much stronger and more fun.
Youth choice and voice is very important for DYCD. As a matter of fact, our agency name includes youth, right? So one of the things we do, even with any workforce applications that we do ask young people what kind of career field they're interested in. And that's why we work very closely with our providers when it comes to matching them with different opportunities. We always ask our providers to make sure prioritize what they're interested in terms of exploring, right? I know it's not the case all the time, but that's the direction we want to move towards. We want to make sure that any young people, whichever career they express interest, we have jobs and opportunities available for them.
We have a student advisory board for the College Now program that we are revamping. And the student advisors are representatives from each of the high schools that provide us with information and support for the program. Now, there's a second question, and I'm just gonna jump in. How do we buy into that? Students are the best way to market a program. It's the best, like, no one can sell a program. Like, if a sister or a sibling or a brother says, I took College Now, I took Work, Learn, Grow, I took New Paths, Future Ready, they are your biggest advocates for any program.
I will add a big component of this for CTE schools is students engaging in their own learning. So when we talk about what are those career standards again, which I keep kind of like repeating myself, it's engaging students in that dialogue. And so part of the curriculum is students actually self-assessing where they're at, and all of this is documented because it shows their progress year by year and the progress they're making throughout the curriculum before they get into these the actual assessments that they have to take for industry certifications. And so when students find purpose and if they find that their education is meaningful and they see like this is purposeful, like that's how students become empowered to take ownership of their own learning. That's when they then become aware about opportunities that are available to them that they can take advantage of. But I think also what's important is to keep in mind that sometimes we get really happy with opportunities and they always come like out of nowhere, or it feels that way for students, which then can become very overwhelming and confusing because as the adults are trying to come up with, the same and aligned language, a shared language, students in the meantime are now a little bit confused. And so it's important for the administration, when they're collaborating and working with different entities, to try to always streamline it back to the framework and why we're here and what is our purpose.
Next question. How accessible are these programs/pathways in all 5 boroughs? As well as, do they have to be a part of the top 10% in their class to qualify for these programs?
Can maybe jump in there. For a lot of our programs, I think in particular, Future Ready NYC, we've tried to be very intentional about the way that the application goes out. We take into account geography, we take into account ENI, so Economic Need Index, for schools that are applying, to try to make sure that there's equitable access in terms of the schools that are participating. And then for the actual programs, we're trying to reduce the barriers as much as possible. So reduce kind of, you have to have this GPA to participate, you have to be able to pass this, and then build in the supports throughout. So we have seen that Future Ready numbers in terms of students participating are kind of matching New York City as a whole, which has been really exciting to see. It was very much intentional in the design, but I think is not historically what we've seen, and so it's really exciting to see a shift. There's a long way to go, and I think in particular supporting students with IEPs is a place that I really want to see us grow in the next few years.
In terms of DYCD, our programs are very accessible. Majority of our program, especially these are run by providers, and we have 66 unique providers for DYCD, over 300 different contracts, and these are located all 5 boroughs in different communities. And in terms of the requirement, is very simple. You have to be New York City residents and between the ages of 14 to 24 and have work authorizations, and you'll be able to participate in SYP.
With our programs, we truly do have a well-rounded program. There are courses that require certain GPAs, certain scores on the regions, but we also have courses that have less requirements for the students. In all of our programs, all students in New York City will have an opportunity to participate and be able to obtain college credits. It's fresh in my mind because I just finished writing the final report, and I speak a lot about that. How we've built this program in 40 years to really include every single student in New York City. The Kingsborough program does work in 4 of the boroughs. We do not work in the Bronx. Only with DYCD work, learn, grow, but we not through college now.
Just to add to what Eliza mentioned before around, how happy we are with the numbers and the progress that we're seeing in terms of closing the gap and accessibility for all students. I think a big part of that story is really around the work that has been done with our support team at the schools, with the administration, the teachers, the guidance counselors, including them in this journey as well, but also the way in which the skills and the standards have made their way back to the instructional framework. And I keep going back to the instructional framework because it all goes back to the school and with the purpose and why we're here. So schools that have a strong administration with a clear vision and just like the right action plan are really the ones who are able to guide students throughout the journey, are able to kind of go through like any confusion or any like added opportunities that may not seem like it's driving, but it does. And so that's really important. And I think that we're seeing that, right? Because with conversations we're having, it's not just about internships, but we're meeting with our CUNY partners. We're talking about, okay, we want to offer this class. No, this class. But let me tell you what this one works better for us. So we're having a conversation about what works best for specific students. And I want to say that I think the Office of Pathways has done a really great job at sitting with principals and being flexible. So even though, for example, they may have agreed and said, these are the 3 college courses we're offering at City Tech or at BMCC, okay, but looking at our data, our students are doing better in this other class, and we might need to restagger this one, or we're gonna change the classes we're offering in English to better prepare them to be successful. And so really now we're beginning to really triangulate our efforts to be able to really prepare students. And so what happens is then when students then feel better prepared, they're happier, they're being more successful. Going back to widening that pool, you're having greater access for kids.
Also, just to add to what Nurus said, so I think it's really great that the DYCD SYEP Work, Learn, Grow programs do not have a GPA requirement, because it's actually those kids that are kind of falling behind that they're the ones that need it the most. So that opportunity to sit with a kid that might not be doing the best in school and giving them that new sense of hope and motivation, that there's just somebody advocating for them, somebody supporting them, somebody that sees them and is investing in them, that might help them with their grades, and better all, like they might just go on to have a purposeful life and do something amazing in their career. And all it takes is that one program. So every kid should qualify for that.
As many young people express interest in alternate post-secondary opportunities like entrepreneurship and certifications in trade, how are you meeting these needs?
I can maybe jump in there, and I'm looking at my friend Julian, who we've worked closely with on this. I think when you look at the data in terms of New York City public schools, about 40% of students are not immediately going on to post-secondary or a certification, which is a massive number. And so we've made a really intentional kind of shift to make sure that we are supporting students no matter what their pathway is. Post-secondary is still going to be required for at least 3/4 of high-paying jobs, and I'm sure Marty knows the stats better than I do there. So post-secondary is still incredibly important for students, and we wanted to meet students where they are, if that's not what they're choosing, and make sure that they still have access to a high-wage, high-demand job. And so we recently have partnered with Shared Lane to do kind of an analysis and trainings about what is out there in terms of the career certification programs in New York City. Because I think there was a big disconnect between those training programs that are doing some incredible work, that I'm sure there's many of you in the audience that run those, and the high schools. If it's really hard for a high school teacher or advisor to know what's out there, to know what's good, what's not good, what's really expensive, what's free, what's a good job. So just a huge shout out to Julian for creating a lot of resources about what that looks like. That we are happy to share with anyone who's interested, and I think that's just the beginning of the work. And then kind of talking about how we connect that back to post-secondary, because we know career journeys are not linear for a lot of students.
In higher ed, a lot of the certifications were housed in continuing education, so adult learners coming back wanting this to upscale or whatever. But there's a huge amount of work we could be doing getting these same certifications to our high school students while they're doing, for example, a College Now class. So we are testing a couple of our classes where you do the class and it aligns perfectly with a certain certification, for example, CompTIA. So at the end of the class, when you have all those skills and they're fresh in your mind, we will continue to support you to take those 2 certification tests and get that certification that you then continue on with. The other thing that we've been doing, this is a national effort, but CUNY's really running heavy with this, is credit for prior learning. The idea that there's these other experiences, not just for adults, but for young people, that translate and should be counted for credit. So when you show up to us, you apply for it, and you get this credit, you don't have to do that anymore. You save money, you save time. And so thinking about things that we've offered to adults for young people is one way that we're doing it.
In terms of the work that we do at NYCETC, and Eliza mentioned in terms of meeting young people where they are, a lot of programming that I mentioned earlier focuses on in-school youth program, but we also have a lot of robust programming for out-of-school youth, Train and Earn, which is a WIOA-funded program. We also have Advance and Earn, which are focused on teaching young people's different credentials so they can enter workforce. Even on the Work, Learn, and Grow this year, partnering with KBCC, we partner with the continuing educations team, and we have young people that are at risk of gun violence who are not in school, and those young people are taking graphic design course. Some of them are taking pharmacy tech for the very first time this year, and if those are successful, we are going to see if we can expand more next year.
This next question, I would like to pass it on to the Erikas and Kimberly, because I feel you are better fit for this. How can we get more parents and or family involved in this process?
I think that when it comes to the parents and the families, you have to be very realistic, especially when it comes to the population of those families. When we talk about underserved youth, Some of their parents are working 2, 3 jobs. A lot of them are single parents. And you have to be realistic that as much as they want to be there, they might not have the means to be there. So when we talk about communication, how can you still communicate with them without them maybe physically being at a workshop? That comes down to, it starts with the student, empowering the student to feel confident enough so that they can share with their parents what it is that they're doing and what they're investing in when it comes to their career. Then it's written communication. It can be emails, it can be phone calls. There are some parents I've worked with that I've never met in person, but they know me by name. They can call me at any time and get an update on their child and what their child is doing. So just opening the lines of communication, and maybe even think about if you're a CBO, can you offer something to parents? Is there some kind of skill building that you can do specifically for adults? And that's an even more amazing way to get them to buy into the work that you're doing.
I think the key here is to think about what do you mean by parent involvement? What are your expectations? If your expectations of parental involvement is just disseminating information, then what involvement can you actually expect other than I logged into a Zoom, maybe I read your letter, maybe I didn't, I don't know. But if your ideal of parent involvement is in welcoming them into decision making, welcoming them to the table as a learner, right? Like finding opportunities for feedback, or even helping them finding their path, right? And I think it's also important to keep in mind that just because we're serving, we are working with students who may be first generation or immigrant families, doesn't mean that their parents are uneducated. And so when we think about the standards and how high we set that bar, is like being able to check yourself is really important too. And so oftentimes what happens at the school level or any level is, oh, the parents are working. We assume they're working. We assume they can join. Our little implicit bias sometimes kicks in. And then what happens is we end up having a lot of direct conversations with kids and their children. So we're talking about to kids about college and making these big decisions. And then you say to the counselor, well, where's the parent? Oh, they don't pick up the phone. Okay, well, it's been 4 years. Really, they never picked up the phone? What are we talking about? We're having a whole conversation about careers and internships and exams and graduation, and you spoke to the parent twice. So that goes to show, right, like the respect that we have. So it goes back to the respect, how much you actually value the parents' input. And it's not about just there's a workshop and nobody came. It's about what does that relationship look like from the moment that you meet them, and what do you see that relationship, how do you see that relationship progressing from 9th grade until senior year, right? I think another piece that I know I've heard a lot from families, and I experienced it myself as a parent and then also as a principal, is oftentimes, right, like we all have our programs and they're not new, like we know they're happening, but oftentimes I don't get the email that tells me when a program is gonna start until 3 weeks before. Or even summer youth, for example, is like we know it's happening, but there's like all these we have to wait for the right dates because all the pieces have to be in motion, and we get that. But I think going back to shared language and communication, as a parent, if we want parents to be able to plan, because we're all busy, right? If they are given hey, here's your handbook for the key deadlines and dates so you to be on the lookout for in terms of CUNY, early college, internships, high school stuff, right? You're putting it on the radar for a parent. And so we have been conditioned to follow the school year calendar. So parents already think September to June, this is school time, right? July, August, it's whatever is happening. It looks different in different families. But I do think is that being mindful of people's times, being respectful of it, getting ourselves organized, better organized, so that even though we can't give a specific date, we're able to provide families in one space the timeline of what to be on the lookout for.
Oh, I wasn't expecting that. Dear Asheanna, what is your vision for how NYC should best prepare young people for their careers? Hey guys. Listen, was not expecting this, okay? A little flustered. I would say that how, when it comes to preparing youth, the best thing that you can do is, I actually had a conversation with Eliza about this. When it comes to apprenticeships, a lot of people get discouraged, especially since it is high school students. Oh, how it's high school students, we don't know if we trust them. But think about this. Most of the internships that you have coming in are college students. They are just one step ahead of us. As much power and as much dedication that they have, we can give you the same thing or maybe some more. It's a lot about trusting the youth, and I feel like having a support system where youth is very trusted in the workforce is something that I would highly love, because during the National Apprenticeship Week that happened a little while back, there was a conversation of how these opportunities don't necessarily exist, and it is really amazing to take them with a grain of salt. They are very amazing. Let your students know these opportunities exist. Push them out, especially those students that you think, oh, how, yeah, they're not doing that well in school. Push them for these different opportunities, because not everybody is meant to learn in a classroom. A lot of us learn outside of the classroom. We learn through those experiences. We are hands-on. Push them for those experiences. Let them learn and grow. Thanks. I'm still a little nervous, guys. That was a lot. Okay, back to our regular scheduled program. How do your organization support undocumented youth excluded from some or most career development programs and paid opportunities?
I think this is a really good and hard question that we think about and talk about a lot. I think to some extent, to Erika's point on shared language of what you think about as career development programming, I think there's a really wide range of what that looks like. I think a lot of it really is available to students that are undocumented in terms of career exploration, being able to understand what that looks like, being able to do job fairs, being able to do what we call workplace challenges. So there are some kind of experiences that you can do that are paid with employers that are not full internships. You're not working for the employer. All of that is really incredible, and we still recognize that we're setting you up for a career that you may not be able to enter that career in. So I think it's a half answer, it's a partial answer, but just is to say that there's a career development is much more than just a paid internship, and I think we really need to think about the whole breadth of experiences that people can participate in.
Diversifying your funding sources. Obviously, we are big government, but all of our money doesn't have to come from government. It can come from private foundations, funders, and some of them are here. So making sure that we celebrate those foundations and other funding agencies that do support this kind of work is important. Yeah.
Undocumented students are allowed to take all of our programs, and at Kingsborough in the college, they are also able to participate in college careers. I think the struggle is what we're doing for them in order for them to get into those careers once they graduate, but they are not excluded in any way from any of our programs.
For example, at the Food Education Fund, we were able to fundraise to have scholarships readily available for food and finance high school students. And so together we would come, look at our pool of students, and it was based on needs. And so that gave us an opportunity to help our undocumented students that didn't qualify for loans, didn't qualify for assistance, to be able to help them at least get them through their first year of college. So that's for college, right? But I think that in general, going back to CBOs and how they can really leverage their power is working with NYCD and finding ways of getting grants. I think grants are really, really helpful, that there are ways they can bring back to the schools as well.
How can CBOs at high schools without workforce contact incorporate more opportunities for students?
I think that's why it's very important, right? CBOs work together because, at some schools there are multiple CBOs and some has workforce contracts, some does not. And that's why, it's important that providers are engaging the school principals, making sure where the needs are, and when the applications opens up, they're referring those participants to our programming. So they're also served.
Hey guys, we're back. Tell our panelists bye. They did an amazing job. That was it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining. We really do appreciate it. Have a good one. Enjoy the rest of your day.